All right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick's on the Power. So I want to talk about Shawn Rhoden in this video. So not a whole lot of videos made about Shawn Rhoden leading up to the 2018 Mr. Olympia, and not a whole lot of people discussing Shawn's name as a top-level threat to the Olympia this year. Now, keep in mind that earlier this year, Shawn Rhoden was scheduled to compete at the 2018 Arnold Classic in Columbus, Ohio, but due to a severe illness, and actually he was anemic and losing blood and had to undergo all these blood transfusions, he was not able to do the Arnold, Ohio. So I think a lot of people kind of forgot about Shawn Rhoden and maybe wrote him off going into this 2018 Mr. Olympia. Now, I definitely think that 2017 was not Shawn's best Olympia. Arguably, it was one of his worst Olympia appearances, in my opinion. He slipped a couple placings. Now, keep in mind, Shawn Rhoden took second to Phil Heath in 2016, and that was just less than 2 years ago. So there's that. Recently, I've seen one of the most interesting interviews I've seen with Shawn Rhoden, I think, ever, and that was on the Jay Cutler TV YouTube channel. They did a great job of having Jay interview Shawn, and during that interview, Shawn said a lot of very fascinating things, a lot of provocative things, but the number one thing that stood out to me is going to be this clip that I'm going to show you guys right here, where Shawn is talking about Phil Heath and how he says that Phil is a bad ambassador for the sport of bodybuilding and how Phil hasn't done anything during his 7 years as Mr. Olympia to help further or promote the sport of bodybuilding. So I'll go ahead and roll that clip right here.
Congratulations to Mr. Olympia for what he has done, but I don't think he has done anything for the sport of bodybuilding personally. For someone that has won that many titles, what have you done for bodybuilding? I look at, someone like yourself who is retired, and I'm like, wow, Jay's at the Army base. Wow, he's not even competing. I was like, but, to see, four-time Mr. Olympia retired and still out there on the daily grind, and then the current Mr. Olympia that doesn't travel. That doesn't benefit our sport at all. And if you're 7-time Mr. Olympia, there should be a whole lot of shit that you have done with those 7 titles to bring, more attention to bodybuilding, more notoriety to bodybuilding, besides just saying that I got 7 titles. And I think it's time for a change.
So a lot of people sent me this clip, and they were asking what I thought about it, if I thought there was any truth to it, how I thought Shawn was going to do at this year's Olympia. So my initial opinion on this, number one, is I'm very excited to see this side of Shawn Rhoden, because one of the criticisms against Shawn in the past has been that he seemed kind of emotionless on stage. He didn't really seem too enthusiastic about being on the Olympia stage. So it's interesting to see a side of Shawn Rhoden where he's passionate, and of course he's stirring the pot with the current 7-time Mr. Olympia Phil Heath, which obviously in the past there has been some bad blood between the two of them. And another thing that Shawn Rhoden said in this interview that I thought was interesting is that he said the press conference is going to be interesting and that he's not going to hold back, which I think, again, is a good positive point for Shawn Rhoden, because I think Shawn needs to open up more. I think if he puts himself in the middle of these conversations, in the middle of these controversies, and starts speaking up and speaking his mind more, he'll get a larger fan base. Because Shawn has always been kind of one of the quieter guys, the more laid-back guys, the more relaxed guys. And I think for that reason, he hasn't drawn as much attention to himself as some of the other guys have. So let's get back to that initial statement. 7-time Mr. Olympia Phil Heath. He has been Mr. Olympia for 7 years now. The statement that he hasn't done anything really for the sport of bodybuilding, the statement that he hasn't done much to promote the sport of bodybuilding during his reign as Mr. Olympia. Now, do I think there's any truth to this statement? So I think to some extent there is a little bit of truth to this. Number one is the fact that Phil Heath is the best bodybuilder on the planet right now, and he has been for the past 7 years. He's arguably, the bodybuilder that the most fans want to hear from, but he's also the bodybuilder that does seemingly the least amount of interviews, the least amount of appearances. You see some of these lesser-known bodybuilders doing interviews left and right, making appearances left and right. And the fact of the matter is that is something that you don't really see Phil Heath doing as much as some of these other guys. So I think in that regard, a lot of us would like to see Phil Heath open up more and do more interviews, maybe make himself more accessible. But on the other side of that, I do have to give Phil credit. On social media, he is extremely interactive with his fans. Granted, a lot of people say that Phil has them blocked, and I used to be included on that list of people blocked by Phil Heath, but recently he unblocked me. And I've seen on his social media, on his Instagram, he does make a serious effort to reply to fan comments and to interact with fans on social media. So even though we don't really see, the interviews, the appearances as much, he does make an effort to be interactive on his social media, which I think, is something no other Mr. Olympia has really had to deal with during their reign, is because before Phil, you had Cutler and you had Dexter, and then you had Ronnie Coleman before that. And social media really wasn't a thing back then, so the dynamic has kind of changed of, what does it really mean to promote the sport of bodybuilding from then to now? Maybe back then, traveling was more of a necessity for Mr. Olympia to promote bodybuilding, but maybe today, sitting at home on social media might be just as effective at reaching a large audience for a bodybuilder as traveling. So I do think that needs to be taken into consideration. Say Big Ramy wins the Olympia this year, just purely hypothetical. What do you guys think that Big Ramy would do differently than Phil Heath did to be a better promoter for bodybuilding than Phil Heath was? I mean, just ask yourselves that honestly. Do you think Big Ramy would be making more appearances or doing more interviews or responding to more fans? Hell, Shawn Rhoden, for example, if he won the Olympia this year, again, purely hypothetical, you got to ask yourself, what would Shawn do differently than Phil did to better represent bodybuilding? Now, obviously, there's a lot of things that you could improve upon with Phil Heath. Maybe number one, not getting involved in the drama. When you see a negative comment, maybe just it's better not to reply. I've seen in the past, that's one of the criticisms against Phil, is that when he has a disagreement with a fan, oftentimes he'll answer them. And that'll do more harm than good for Phil's image. And again, just maybe not blocking as many people that are, just following you to be fans. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below about Shawn's statement on Phil. Do you think Phil is a good ambassador for the sport of bodybuilding? And if not, what do you think he could do differently to be a better ambassador for the sport of bodybuilding? So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. And please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Nick Strength and Power, signing out.